Demonstration from my family really showed me the power of our imagination to create the world that we live in. And so this was an incredibly important lesson that I gathered from a very young age, and just how important our creative process is and fundamental to everything that we experience. So along with the creative aspect of my life growing up, my parents also gave me a lot of freedom with figuring out what I wanted to believe. They didn't force a spiritual or religious framework on me and they encouraged me to determine what I felt that the divine was and what that meant to me. And I spent a lot of time contemplating the nature of life and the meaning of life. And I would sit and I'd spend countless hours looking at the stars and thinking about just how small we are in comparison to the entire cosmos, and yet how vast and massive each part of our life is as well. And so this is a quote by Alan Watts: "You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself." So I thought about that a lot, and I thought about, how is it that I'm having this experience? I'm looking out into this world, and I have my own viewpoint on things, and there's other people that are looking out, and they're seeing the same thing, but they're having different feelings. They have different interpretations of it. And so I really started to think about reality through these different kind of lenses. And I had an experience when I was a child that was very fundamental to really evolving my consciousness and the way that I saw things. And it was through this kind of questioning of reality. And I had an experience when I was a little girl. I was sitting I was in the bathroom, and I was looking in the mirror at myself, and I was looking into my eyes. I was looking really, really deep into my eyes, and I was thinking, who am I? Who am I? Who is the I behind my eyes? Who is the I behind my eyes, behind the eyes? And I kept questioning this and looking deeper, and I couldn't find an end to that. And I didn't have a very clear answer either. It was just this vast everythingness that was indefinable to myself. And so I continue on this thought process, and I sat down, and I was going to the bathroom. And it's kind of a funny story to share, but it was very meaningful to me. And I basically started to think, I wonder how many people around the world are eating right now. I thought of all these different people around the world that were eating. And I thought, I wonder how many people around the world are sleeping right now. I imagined half of the world asleep. I thought, I wonder how many people around the world are kissing right now. And I thought of all these people kissing and sharing love, and then laughing, and all these basic human things that we do. And then I thought, I wonder how many people around the world are going to the bathroom right now. And that was a really uncomfortable kind of a thought, but they kind of made me laugh. And then I was like, I wonder how many people around the world are going to the bathroom right now and thinking this exact same thought. And with that thought, I completely left my body. And I don't really know how to describe it, but I was no longer in any kind of a human form. I had no identity. I was in this infinite void. It was neither light nor dark. And I was up there just hanging out. And then all of a sudden, there was this question pressing through the space. And it was asking, who am I? And I looked around, and I could not, there was no body. There was nobody there. I had no memory of myself. I had no name. And I had this realization that I was everything and I was nothing at the same time. And from that moment, and at some point, I'm contemplating this, or whatever this thing that's contemplating, this aspect of consciousness that was looking, had to decide whether or not I wanted to come back to the world. And I was like, well, what would I do here? There's nothing to do. So I ended up basically finding myself again through remembering who my parents were, remembering who my family was. And then once I was able to follow these threads, it was like following a thread back to myself, this ego aspect of myself, Krystle, that I was then back in my body as a little girl. And I was completely blown. I had absolutely no words for what had just happened to me. There was nothing that I've ever learned or been taught that could explain this experience to me. And I've spent the rest of my life contemplating that, and really considering, you know, how is it that everything that we perceive is connected and yet it's separate? And so, you know, we have a lot of different names in what we want to call this aspect of creation, the divine, God, oneness, the consciousness, it's energy. And we can call it a lot of different things, but ultimately I think that we're getting at this omnipresent fabric of creation that we're all intricately a part of. And so these kind of early childhood experiences were what really set me on my path, not only spiritually, but creatively. And my early body of work, I started to do these pastel portraits that I was trying to imbue life into what was, you know, an inanimate object. And I was really fascinated by the ability of art to give a feeling of life within a flat space, you know, that I was like, wow, I can take this blank page and all of a sudden I can create something that feels like it has spirit to it. It has an energy to it. So I was interested in, you know, communicating these different feelings and emotions of the human experience through these early portraits. And then I started to get more into painting, and so these paintings got quite a bit looser. And then I had a breakthrough moment where I was, you know, basically not wanting to just be rendering what I was looking at. And I had been fiercely intimidated by a blank canvas or a blank page and not looking at something and just letting whatever was coming to me come out. And so I was almost a little afraid of what that would look like. And so I challenged myself to not look at anything and to just paint from my soul. And so I embarked upon this painting I call Seed. And if you kind of look, it's very abstract, but there's these two beings, and they're each an eye, and they're kind of wrapping around each other. They become a DNA strand. And there's this point where they're emerging out of on the bottom right-hand corner. And it was what I called it a point of origin. And I felt like this particular point in the painting was very important. And I wanted to do something to kind of counter the abstract, flowy, organic qualities. So I was thinking in terms of shapes and geometry. And so I grabbed a little scrap piece of paper and I decided what was the best shape to base this pattern off of, and I drew a circle. And then I looked at that circle and I drew another circle. And then I looked at that for a minute and I drew another circle. And I kept drawing these circles, and all of a sudden they were all locking in together in this really intricate way, like a lock and key. And I was blown away by this, and I was like, oh my God, it's beautiful. It's perfect. I was so excited. I had found this really cool pattern. And so I painted it into the painting. And it happened, I felt like I put kind of a stamp on the piece. It was like, it's finished. And then I sat with the painting and I was like, there is something about this that is so familiar to me. And I don't know why, but I've seen this before. And so I'm sitting with it, and it took a couple weeks, but I realized that this pattern that I had drawn, I came to later realize that this is a close-up of it, that this pattern had a name across world culture, and it was called the Flower of Life. And this is the very first iteration of the Flower of Life. It's called the Seed of Life. And that was the basic first pattern that I had painted into this piece. And so when you continue, it's basically a network of circles, that every circle is connected to the center of every other circle. And this is an example of how you can unfold this geometry, adding in these sequential circles. And so the 6 circles around one forms this beautiful seed. And from there, this is how traditionally you can see the Flower of Life represented, And it usually has this kind of a boundary around it, but actually that's hiding a lot of information, because the true nature of the flower of life is that it goes off in every direction infinitely forever. And you could go smaller and smaller or bigger, you can find no end to this pattern. And so I became fascinated with this matrix, this amazing grid that when I looked into it, and I started to paint it passionately, and I started to be able to extract so many different shapes, so many different forms that I would see within this, and I became really passionate about it, and through my artwork, exploring and studying it. And I apologize, these slides, some of them look a little dark up here, but so I started to trace the origins of the flower of life in ancient history. And this is a picture of the flower of life from beginning of recorded history. It's from the temple of Osiris in Abydos, Egypt. And this has been imprinted into the pyramid temple wall, excuse me. And it's not etched, it's not burned. They actually don't even really know how this manifested onto the wall in terms of the way the molecular structure of the stone has changed. This is a mosaic from the Judean desert in Israel, and this is from the 1st century BC. And so you start seeing these examples of the flower of life all across the world. This is the flower of life sphere under the guardian lions, which are in the forbidden city of Beijing, and they're called the Fu dogs. And traditionally, they're represented as two, and they're guarding the entrance of a temple. And traditionally, the male will have his hand on the sphere that's depicting this geometry, and the female has her paw on the cub. So he's protecting the structure, and she's protecting the family. And in a sense, you know, I can see the structure being both the home, it's also the structure of like the physical, the structure of space, keeping that, it's the sacred blueprint of life and protecting that. And these are other examples of flower of life in different shrines in India, mosaic in Turkey. That's a close-up of the Fu dog. You can see that's the flower of life around a sphere. This is from Israel, and excuse me, this is from Romania, a Romanian temple door. You can see the seat of life down at the bottom. This is from the 6th century. Is another Israel, and then its presence in crop circles. And so there's all different iterations of flower of life and different aspects of sacred geometry if you start to study crop circle formations. And this is a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci, and so he was also studying, when you look into his drawings, he was studying the flower of life. And you can see he's pulling out, on the right-hand side, he's pulling out the different the triangles or tetrahedrons. He's showing the movement within it. There's so much. This pattern isn't flat. It's actually, it's three-dimensional, multidimensional, and it's not stationary, it's spinning. So it's, you know, there's a tremendous amount of information that's contained within this. And so Leonardo said, learn how to see, realize that everything connects to everything else. And so that was the gift of this pattern to me, was that it was allowing me a deeper language and understanding. How is it that everything is connected in the world? And yet we have all of these different unique variations, that there's something underlying what we perceive that's a unifying factor. And so I started to do these very, you know, with this newfound insight around sacred geometry, which if you look at the flower of life and the study of the flower, and these sacred forms that come out of it was called sacred geometry, and it's been used across the world in building pyramids, temples, the human body. I mean, it's the divine design, the divine architecture of life itself, and then its application in art and music. And so it brought me back, you know, to that contemplation of this infinite void and the infinite potential that we have within it, and just adding one point and how much can be unlocked from that. So I started to think about things, you know, from this microcosmic to macrocosmic scale, and you can see how here with the flower of life relating to the way that cells divide. And when you start to connect the points within the flower of life, you create this shape. It's called Metatron's cube. And within Metatron's cube, you get the basic building blocks of life, which is the platonic solids. So all these shapes can start to be derived from the flower of life when you connect the circles, and you pull out what would basically be the masculine form of the geometry. This is carbon 111, which I love because it just shows, you know, the relationship of these 6 points around one. And so this is its manifestation in molecular structure. The carbon fullerenes. This is pollen, zoomed in really close, and you can see again how each of these, things aren't just random in nature. You know, there's a divine intelligence that's embedded within things. These are pieces of sand zoomed in like thousands of iterations. So when you look at this, you can start to see that, you know, the fractal nature of reality, essentially. And crystals, sunflower, you know, pineapple, honeycomb, even the scales of snakes. And then when you start to look into, and there's the study called cymatics, which is the study of sound vibrations, and you can study them whether it's in a vibrating medium, which whether it's liquid or it could be sand. And if you vibrate a plate to different frequencies, you get these corresponding shapes that are repeatable. So through this, you start to see that every frequency has a geometric signature to it. And these are some more of the cymatic patterns. From lower frequency has a less intricate amount of information in it. So on the top left, that would be a lower frequency to higher frequency. The higher the frequency, the more complex the patterns. And then even just looking out into the cosmos and nebulas and galaxies and water droplets in water, and you can start to see how these two intersecting circles come together, and they're beginning to form the flower of life. So, and that's us. We are the flower of life. We are these intersecting ripples of consciousness, and our center is connected to the center of everything else. And so I enjoyed this quote, which is this: so as is the atom, so is the universe. As is the human body, so is the cosmic body. As is the human mind, so is the cosmic mind. And as is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. And that's from the Upanishads. And so the applications of sacred geometry, it engages both our logical mind, but it also it is a deeply intuitive practice when you start to work with it. And it ripples into pretty much all elements of life, from observing and studying nature, spirituality, science, mathematics, astrology, architecture, art and design, music, dance, energy generation and storage. I believe sacred geometry is a key to understanding how to create free energy, because it's understanding the nature of the fractal and how we can store and extract from this infinite generative source of the cosmos. And ancient cultures also deeply were aware of this knowledge, and I believe that it's something that's been suppressed and kind of kept away from us for a long time. And I feel, in a sense, it was intentionally to sort of disconnect us from this divine power and put power of life into something else. And so as we come back to an understanding of sacred geometry, we start to remember, you know, this divine reflection, the sacred in everything. And so it's a little brief microcosmic sacred geometry workshop of how I started to work with these patterns. And I'm going to now tell you a little bit more about my work and kind of how I've brought this into the work that I'm creating. And so interestingly, my life took me on a very unexpected sort of twist in my creative path when I was invited to do a live performance painting about 14 years ago. And I had never seen a live painting before, and I thought this was kind of a very interesting and challenging proposition, because it'd take me, you know, definitely not painting a painting in a day. And sharing my creative process is, and as many of you I'm sure know, it's not always easy. It's a very vulnerable thing to do. So, but I took on this challenge, and I got up and I started to do live performance painting, and I started to create these works that were infused with sacred geometry, and kind of showing these different iterations of the flower of life and the kind of shapes that can come out of it. And I was really passionate about the live painting because it was a way that I was able to start sharing and talking about sacred geometry with a lot of people. And I just was told I only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to have to go through these slides pretty quickly, but you can start to see how this has informed much of my work. And I've painted at festivals all over the United States, many festivals internationally, and really just passionate about bringing this raw, you know, intuitive aspect of live painting and the creative process into the festival setting, and helping to inspire other people to connect with their own creative process. And so there's Electric Forest in Michigan. And so my work started to get increasingly more intricate over time. And some of these paintings I did coming onto album cover. And they're all these explorations of sacred geometry. And so I'll just kind of, I don't have time to explain these works, but I started this painting here in Australia back in 2014. I named it Alchemy. And if you want to see any of these paintings up close, I have several of my pieces in the Evolve Gallery. And so if you go into the Evolve Gallery, you can see them right when you walk in. And I'll be live painting throughout today and speaking on a panel later today. So the power of imagination makes us infinite. So these are some collaborative paintings that I've done with dear friends, and I share this because, you know, it's not just about our own unique creative process, it's how we're able to engage and share that with other people. And that's really where we find this limitlessness of our imagination and of our creativity, and really rippling out like the flower of life, connecting our centers and creating something magical. So this is us painting at Electric Forest, and some large-scale collaborative works. I also did a piece in the Mushroom Cafe at Cosm. And so the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, which is infinite, and that's William Blake. So thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm sorry I had to kind of rush through the end of that, but I hope that you guys were able to take something valuable away from this talk today, and I thank you so much for being present here with me, and I love you all, and thank you so much. If you have any questions, you can come talk to me afterwards, so thank you. Thank you.